Usually when we think about surgical tools, we think about the tool itself, like all the heavy lifting.
Right, yeah, like a scalpel.
Exactly. I mean, a scalpel cuts because it's incredibly sharp, or a drill bores through bone because it's made of a much harder material.
Sure.
So the physical limit of that tool, the actual stopping point of the cut, is completely reliant on the steady hand of the surgeon holding it.
It's a very traditional, purely mechanical relationship.
Mm-hmm.
The tissue in that scenario is basically just a canvas. It's passive.
Right.
The tool, and obviously the person wielding it, is entirely dictating the reality of the surgery.
But what if I told you that there is a surgical tool out there where the tissue itself, specifically the microscopic drops of water inside your own cells, acts as the ultimate set of brakes?
Wow, yeah.
Where your body actually stops the instrument from going too far.
See, that completely flips the script on how we view surgical intervention. I mean, the body is no longer just this passive thing being operated on.
Right.
It is actively dictating the physical boundaries of the procedure in real time.
It's fascinating. And welcome to the deep dive. Today, our mission is decoding a huge stack of medical physics papers, clinical studies, and surgical device guides that we've gathered for you.
And we're tackling one very specific question today.
Yes, we are. We want to answer how a simple molecule, just water, acts as the ultimate set of brakes for a highly powerful surgical laser.
Yeah.
And we are going to look at this through a very delicate lens. We're exploring how the water content inside vaginal mucosal tissue explicitly dictates the depth and effectiveness of thermal ablation when doctors use a fractional CO2 laser.
And to anyone listening who might be feeling slightly intimidated by that wall of medical jargon we just threw at you, hang in there.
Yeah, stick with us.
Because underneath all the clinical terminology, this is actually a beautiful, elegant story about physics meeting biology.
It really is. I mean, it's a story about how doctors are using the literal boiling of microscopic drops of water to trick the body into turning back the clock on aging tissue. But to even begin to understand how that works, we need to establish some ground rules about lasers for you. Because, it isn't like a sci-fi movie where a laser just blasts whatever is in front of it.
Far from it. In the world of medical lasers, it is almost never about raw power. I mean, you could theoretically have the most powerful laser on the planet, but if it doesn't have a specific target in the tissue,
it just doesn't do anything.
Right. It is essentially useless. It's all about the chromophore.
The chromophore.
Yeah. That's the exact specific target that a particular wavelength of light is designed to seek out, absorb into, and basically destroy.
Okay, so before we get into the sensitive environment of the vaginal canal, we really have to talk about what a CO2 laser actually does to human tissue.
Sure.
Our sources specify that a medical CO2 laser operates at a very specific infrared wavelength. It's 10,600 nanometers.
That's the exact number, yeah.
So at that specific wavelength, what is the laser actually looking for? What's the chromophore?
At 10,600 nanometers, the laser's primary overwhelming target is water.
Just water.
Yes. It is literally a water-seeking missile.
Right.
Now, think about human soft tissue for a second. We are basically walking sponges.
Right. We're mostly water.
Exactly. Our soft tissue is roughly 75 to 80% water. So when this specific wavelength of infrared light hits that tissue, it is instantaneously absorbed by both the water inside the cells.
And the water between the cells.
Exactly, the water floating in the extracellular space.
Okay, so the result of that absorption is heat, right? Extreme, instantaneous heat. Because one of the physics papers we went through has this great breakdown of the process.
Oh, the ablation velocity stuff.
Yeah. It points out that removing tissue with a CO2 laser isn't cutting in the way we usually think about it. The laser deposits its energy, and the water in the tissue spikes from normal body temperature, which is, around 37 degrees Celsius straight, to 100 degrees Celsius in a fraction of a second.
It just boils.
Right, it just turns into gas.
It's flash vaporization.
Yeah.
And the tissue literally turns to steam and is just carried away. And the physics governing this process are so well understood and predictable that the sources actually provide a mathematical formula for it.
Oh boy, here we go.
It's called the ablation velocity. The formula is V equals FE over Q.
Okay, I have to stop you there because when I saw that formula in the notes, honestly, my eyes completely glazed over.
That's totally fair.
Yeah, V equals FE over Q. I'm going to need you to translate that into something I can actually picture.
All right, let's break it down into its moving parts because it actually tells a fascinating story.
Okay, I'm listening.
So V is simply the velocity. It's basically asking, how fast is this laser digging a hole into the tissue?
Got it.
And that speed is determined by a tug of war between the other letters. So E is the irradiance. You can think of that as the raw power or like the brightness of the laser pushing into the tissue.
Okay, so that's the laser fighting its way in.
Right. And Q is the heat of vaporization. That's the sheer amount of energy required to force that specific volume of water to boil.
So the power of the laser is literally fighting against the physical energy needed to boil the water.
Exactly.
But what about that little F? You said Fe over Q.
Right. So F is the efficiency factor. It represents how much of the laser's absorbed energy is actually converted into pure tissue removal, the pure ablation.
Okay.
And here is the crucial detail from the research. The CO2 laser is only about 40% efficient at turning its energy into pure vaporization.
Wait, I really need to push back on that. A 40% efficiency rate.
Yeah.
I mean, in almost any other industry, if a tool wastes 60% of its energy, that is a massive design failure.
That sounds bad, doesn't it?
It does. If it's basically just flash blowing the skin and carrying the cellular debris away as steam, but 60% of the heat isn't going into the steam, where is it going? Doesn't that make this tool incredibly dangerous?
You are hitting on the exact question that perplexed early researchers. Yeah, and the answer is actually the secret to why this laser is so profoundly useful in medicine.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
The wasted heat is actually the feature, not the bug, because the 10,600 nanometer wavelength is absorbed so violently and strongly by water, it is physically incapable of traveling deep into the tissue.
Oh, so the water just eats the light instantly.
Yes, exactly. The optical penetration depth of a CO2 laser in water-rich human tissue is only about 10 to 15 micrometers.
Wow.
90% of the laser's energy is entirely consumed in that incredibly thin, microscopic first layer of tissue.
Let me just give some scale to that for you listening. 10 to 15 micrometers is roughly 0.01 millimeters.
Tiny.
Yeah, we were talking about distances so small, they are frankly hard for the human brain to even visualize.
Right, so the laser simply cannot penetrate any deeper. The water stops it cold.
It's the brakes.
Exactly. And that wasted 60% of the heat. It doesn't travel deep into the body and damage organs. Instead, it gets trapped.
No.
It creates a tiny, highly controlled zone of thermal damage resting perfectly beneath the vaporization crater.
It leaves this perfectly measured footprint of heat.
Yes.
But if we follow the logic here, if a laser vaporizes tissue and deliberately leaves a layer of thermal damage, a burn, how on earth does that help regenerate the tissue?
That's the big question.
Because normally when you burn something, you get a thick scar.
Right. And to avoid that scarring, we have to look at the delivery method engineers paired with this laser.
Okay, what do you mean?
Well, if you just dragged a continuous CO2 laser beam across the tissue, you would indeed just peel off the entire top layer.
Yikes.
Yeah, it would leave a massive sheet of thermal damage. That's traditional, fully ablative resurfacing, which requires a brutal recovery time.
So how do they get around peeling off the whole surface?
They developed something called fractional scanning technology.
Fractional, okay.
Yeah. Instead of hitting the surface like a continuous flashlight beam, the machine uses automated optics to split the laser.
Oh,
It delivers the energy in a grid of tiny, microscopic columns of thermal damage. The literature calls these microscopic treatment zones, or MTZs.
You know, the analogy that came to mind when I was reading this part of the sources is aerating a lawn.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, like if your lawn is struggling, you don't bring in a bulldozer and scrape all the topsoil off.
Right, that would ruin it.
Exactly. You bring in a machine that punches tiny, deep holes into the dirt, leaving the majority of the grass between the holes completely untouched.
Yep.
The lawn breathes and the whole thing grows back thicker and healthier.
That is a perfect visualization, because the sources indicate that with a fractional CO2 laser, only about 15 to 20% of the actual treatment area is vaporized.
Meaning a massive 80% of the tissue in that area is completely untouched by the laser beam.
And the biological response to that intact tissue is where the magic happens.
How so?
Well, that 80% of undamaged tissue acts as a massive reservoir of healthy, viable cells. The moment those tiny microscopic injuries occur, that reservoir springs into action. It immediately jumpstarts the body's natural wound healing cascade.
So by making thousands of tiny, perfectly measured injuries, you are essentially hacking the body's repair system.
Yes, and we can actually look at the chemistry of that hack based on the papers. The instant that 10 to 15 micrometer thermal footprint hits the tissue, the body recognizes the heat stress.
Right.
The sources detail the release of specific chemical mediators and heat shock proteins.
Ah, I saw those in the papers. They highlighted proteins with names like HSP70 and HSP47.
That's right.
What are those actually doing in the tissue, though?
They act as cellular chaperones.
Chaperones.
Yeah, so when cells are exposed to severe thermal insults, basically when they get dangerously hot, these chaperone proteins rush in to protect the surviving cells.
Oh, wow.
They prevent existing proteins from denaturing or folding incorrectly due to the heat. And more importantly, they trigger a massive release of growth factors.
Like what kind of growth factors?
We're talking about epidermal growth factor, vascular endothelial growth factor, and transforming growth factor beta.
It's almost like the damaged cells are sending out a chemical emergency broadcast to the untouched 80%, yelling, send supplies, we need to rebuild this area immediately.
And the body answers the call.
Yeah.
The timeline in the study shows that within 30 days of this fractional thermal damage, fibroblasts, which are the cells responsible for building structural framework, are recruited in droves to the area.
And they just start rebuilding.
Exactly. They begin synthesizing brand new collagen, fresh elastic fibers, and they even stimulate the creation of new blood vessels. You're literally instructing the body to generate a brand new extracellular matrix from scratch.
Okay, we have a really solid foundation now for you listening. We've got the physics of the CO2 laser hitting water, creating a tiny heat footprint.
Right.
And we've got the fractional delivery system aerating the tissue to hack the body's healing process without causing a massive scar.
Yep, those are the two pillars.
So now we need to bring these two concepts together and answer the core mission we promised you at the start of the deep dive.
Let's do it.
What actually happens when you apply this incredibly specific technology to the unique environment of the vaginal mucosa?
To appreciate the impact there, we first have to understand the condition this is most frequently used to treat. It's called genitourinary syndrome of menopause, often abbreviated as GSM.
Right. And you'll also see it referred to in older literature as vulvovaginal atrophy.
Yes.
And from what I understand from the clinical studies, this condition is primarily driven by the massive drop in estrogen that occurs post-menopause. And the physical changes to the tissue are incredibly profound.
They are structurally devastating to the tissue's function, honestly. Without the constant presence of estrogen, the vaginal epithelium, which is the surface lining, becomes incredibly thin, pale, and flat.
Yeah.
Crucially, the tissue loses its natural elasticity and its hydration.
The sources also mention that the actual ratio of collagen types in the tissue shifts. The area loses much of its healthy blood supply, and the natural acidic pH environment gets thrown completely out of balance.
Which all culminates in a terrible array of symptoms for the patient. Severe dryness, itching, burning, and a condition called dyspareunia, which is intensely painful intercourse.
Which is just awful.
Right. The tissue simply cannot function as it used to.
So to combat this, doctors are turning to the fractional CO2 laser. The surgical device guides in our stack mention systems like the Mona Lisa Touch or the Tetra PRO.
Right. The Tetra PRO uses a really interesting 360-degree V2LR probe.
Yeah, to deliver these fractional beams evenly around the walls of the vaginal canal.
Exactly.
But how does that physics formula we debated earlier actually interact with this specific atrophied tissue?
This is where we see the water acting as the brakes.
Ah, here we go.
The exact depth of the burn, the total extent of the tissue alteration, is explicitly dictated by the amount of water present in the mucosal lamina propria.
Remind me, that's the connective tissue just beneath the surface, right?
Yes. So when the laser pulse fires into this specific mucosal tissue, what is physically happening at the microscopic level? The sources say it forms 4 distinct zones.
Okay, let's walk through those zones because they form almost instantaneously upon impact, right?
Very fast. So zone 1 is the vaporization crater.
That's the hole. The laser hits, the water flashes to steam, and the tissue is just gone.
Correct. Lining the very inside of that crater is zone 2, the carbonization area.
Okay.
This is a microscopically thin layer of essentially charred tissue. But zone 3 is the fascinating one. The literature calls it the condensation band.
Okay, wait. What is condensing here?
Just beneath the crater, the connective tissue absorbs the leftover heat. It loses its water, but it doesn't get quite hot enough to vaporize.
Okay, so what does it do?
It coagulates, and the temperature gradient in this band is perfectly mapped out by the physics. In the upper part of this band, where the tissue temperature hits above 65 degrees Celsius, the existing loose collagen fibers instantly contract and forcefully shorten.
Oh, providing an immediate tightening effect to the loose tissue.
Yes, and just a few micrometers below that, where the temperature drops to between 50 and 65 degrees Celsius, the collagen denatures. This specific denaturing is the exact trigger for those heat shock proteins and the massive 30-day rebuilding phase we discussed earlier.
Okay, this is the detail that absolutely blew my mind when I was reading the studies.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. The width of this entire condensation band, this magic zone of thermal healing, is only 50 to 110 micrometers wide.
It's incredibly narrow.
And it is perfectly, flawlessly limited to that tiny microscopic size, specifically because the water stopped the laser from going any deeper.
Right.
This band literally acts as a thermal barrier, protecting the deeper, highly sensitive tissues of the vaginal wall from being burned.
It is quite literally a built-in biological safety mechanism.
That's wild.
Because the mucosa is inherently rich in water. I mean, the ground matrix of the tissue is packed with free water molecules and water ion bonded to polysaccharides.
Right.
Because of that heavy water presence, the 10,600 nanometer laser simply cannot penetrate deeply. It hits the water, dumps all of its energy, vaporizes the surface, and leaves that perfectly controlled 50 to 110 micrometer band of heat.
Which triggers the neocollagenesis, the new collagen, and the neovascularization, the new blood supply, without risking a deep, dangerous burn.
Exactly.
So for the patient dealing with GSM, what is the actual clinical outcome of this microscopic process?
The clinical outcomes are frankly remarkable. By stimulating the fibroblasts in this highly controlled manner, the treatment rebuilds the tissue from the inside out.
Oh.
It restores a thick, healthy, stratified squamous epithelium, and vitally, it repopulates the surface cells with glycogen.
Hold on, let's slow down on that point for a second. Why is glycogen so important to this process? I mean, I thought this was just about tightening tissue.
Restoring the glycogen is perhaps the most important functional change.
Really?
Yeah, the healthy lactobacilli bacteria that naturally live in the vaginal canal feed on that glycogen. And when they consume it, they produce lactic acid as a byproduct.
Oh, I see. So by providing the food source for the bacteria naturally drop the vaginal pH back down to healthy acidic levels. You aren't just tightening skin, you are entirely restoring the microenvironment.
You are resetting the ecosystem. And clinically, this translates to profound improvements in symptoms like dryness, burning, and painful sex. Patients often report significant relief after just a few short treatments.
It is incredibly elegant. But, naturally a question arises.
Sure.
If this is just a matter of shooting a laser at tissue to generate heat, why not use a different kind of laser?
A very common question.
Right, because there are dozens of different medical lasers on the market. Why is the CO2 laser so uniquely, perfectly suited for this specific mucosal tissue?
Well, to truly appreciate the CO2 laser, we have to look at what happens when you use the alternatives. Let's start by looking at diode lasers.
Okay, according to our stack of sources, diode lasers operate in the near-infrared spectrum, usually at a wavelength around 800 to 1100 nanometers.
Yep, that's right.
And the absorption spectrum data shows that their absorption in water is 1,000 times less than the CO2 laser.
1,000 times less absorption. That means when a diode laser beam hits human tissue, the water doesn't act as a brake at all.
Wow.
The tissue might as well be transparent. The light just keeps traveling, penetrating deeply, sometimes up to 8 millimeters into the soft tissue.
8 millimeters? We were just talking about a CO2 laser stopping at a fraction of a single millimeter.
I know, it's a huge difference.
Going 8 millimeters deep into delicate mucosal tissue sounds like it would cause massive, widespread thermal damage.
It absolutely would. Now, the sources do note that diode lasers are fantastic for procedures that actually require deep penetration.
Like what?
Well, if you were doing laser hair removal or trying to reduce deep spider veins, you want a laser that ignores water and travels deep to target melanin or hemoglobin.
Ah, okay, that makes sense.
But for delicate superficial mucosal resurfacing, it is far too deep. You would severely damage the vaginal wall.
Okay, so a diode laser is a terrible idea because it goes too deep. What if we go in the exact opposite direction?
You mean erbium lasers?
Yeah. What about erbium lasers? Because the physics data here gets really interesting.
It does.
Erbium lasers operate at 2,940 nanometers, and they are actually absorbed by water 15 times better than the CO2 laser.
Yep, much higher absorption.
So wouldn't that make them superior? I mean, if water is the brake, wouldn't an erbium laser have incredibly strong brakes?
Logically, you would think so, but it turns out the brakes are actually too good.
Too good.
Yeah, because the water absorbs the erbium wavelength so violently and intensely, the penetration is incredibly shallow. An erbium laser only penetrates about 1 to 5 micrometers into the tissue.
Which sounds incredibly safe until you look at the anatomy of the human vascular system.
Ah, you spotted it. You've hit on the exact clinical limitation.
Yeah, the blood vessels.
Right. The average diameter of the blood capillaries running through our soft tissue is between 21 and 40 micrometers, with an average size of about 31 micrometers.
Oh, I see the problem. If your erbium laser only pushes 5 micrometers of heat into the tissue, but you just cut through a blood vessel that is 31 micrometers wide.
You haven't delivered enough heat to seal the walls of the severed vessel.
Right.
The heat only reaches a tiny fraction of the pipe, so the pipe just stays wide open. The clinical result is insufficient hemostasis.
Hemostasis meaning stopping the bleeding.
Exactly. You make the cut, and the tissue bleeds because the thermal damage zone is physically too shallow to coagulate the blood vessels.
It is a classic Goldilocks scenario.
It really is.
The diode laser penetrates way too deeply and burns too much tissue. The erbium laser penetrates too shallowly and leaves the patient bleeding. But the CO2 laser...
The CO2 laser sits right in the middle. It penetrates and coagulates at roughly 50 to 100 micrometers.
which is perfect.
Exactly. Which means its thermal footprint perfectly entirely engulfs those 21 to 40 micrometer blood capillaries.
The heat completely surrounds the vessel, shrinks the collagen in the vessel walls, and instantly stops the bleeding before it even starts.
The coagulation depth is a flawless match for the size of human microvasculature.
Honestly, looking at the numbers, it is an astonishing biological coincidence.
It's incredible.
I mean, the physical size of our microscopic blood vessels just happens to perfectly match the thermal splash zone of a 10,600 nanometer light wave colliding with water. It feels almost as if the CO2 laser was custom built specifically for human anatomy.
It is a beautiful intersection of physics and histology.
Yeah.
And, for anyone studying regenerative medicine, it perfectly encapsulates why understanding the underlying mechanism, the why behind the tool, is so critical.
So, to summarize the journey we've taken you on today, if you were looking to understand the absolute cutting edge of regenerative medicine, especially in delicate areas like women's health, it all comes down to a highly choreographed dance between light energy and water.
Beautifully said.
The water inside our mucosal tissue actively stops the CO2 laser in its tracks, acting as a flawless set of biological brakes.
Right.
It takes destructive energy and turns it into a precise, shallow burst of heat that instructs our cells to rebuild themselves entirely from the inside out.
It highlights why critical thinking is paramount as new medical technologies flood the market. This procedure isn't just magic light waving a wand over the skin to make it younger. It is highly calculated, highly predictable thermodynamics, relying entirely on the exact water content of your specific cells.
Which leaves us with a final, slightly provocative thought for you to mull over.
Yeah.
We now know that the water content in our tissue controls exactly how duct these lasers go and exactly how we heal from them.
Yeah.
So, how might our daily hydration habits alter the effectiveness of these cutting-edge treatments?
Oh, that's an interesting thought.
Right. Furthermore, we know that as we age, the natural water content of our tissues steadily decreases. Could something as simple as drinking a gallon of water a day leading up to a procedure literally change the histological outcome of a fractional laser surgery? I mean, if water is the brake, what happens when the brake fluid is low?
It is a fascinating variable and one that researchers will undoubtedly have to consider as we move toward the future of highly personalized medicine.
It really is something to think about. So, the next time you think of a surgical tool, remember, sometimes the most powerful, most important part of the instrument isn't what's sitting in the surgeon's hand, it's the water sitting inside you. Thanks for taking the deep dive with us today.